If you're the kind of person who wants a computer that just works, something that fits on a cramped desk, stays cool while you're on a Zoom marathon, and doesn't force you to trade performance for size, then the ThinkStation P3 Ultra might be the answer you've been hunting for. You've probably already felt that pang of hesitation when you see a mini PC spec sheet. Is this really enough power for my CAD files? Will it overheat when I'm rendering a video? And what happens when I need more storage? Those are real concerns, and they're exactly the ones I tried to sort out by digging through product listings, tech forums, and the handful of buyer comments that exist for this model. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First, let's talk about who actually benefits from a small form factor workstation. If you work from a home office that's more kitchen table than dedicated room, or if you're a freelance designer who needs a quiet machine that won't dominate the desk space, the P3 Ultra's 13-inch footprint is a big win. The chassis is a sleek black block that slides under a monitor or into a bookshelf without looking out of place. It also comes with a decent amount of ports for its size: USB-C, HDMI, a couple of USB-A slots, and a LAN jack so you can hook up your external drives, a second monitor, or a wired network without needing a dongle hub. For someone who values a tidy workspace and the ability to plug in peripherals directly, that little box punches above its weight. Now, performance. The heart of the machine is an Intel Core Ultra 7, second-generation Ultra processor that runs at 2.4 GHz. It's not a 5 GHz gaming chip, but that clock speed paired with a 20-core architecture means the P3 Ultra handles multi-threaded workloads like batch photo processing, video encoding, or compiling large code bases pretty smoothly. With 32 GB of DDR5 RAM, you'll find switching between Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, and a web browser feels almost seamless. There's no noticeable lag when you drag a high-resolution image from one app to another. The 512 GB SSD is fast enough for everyday tasks and keeps the system snappy, but it's not the kind of space you'd want for a massive media library. If you keep your project files on an external NAS or cloud storage, the SSD size is a non-issue. If you expect to store terabytes of raw footage locally, you'll need to budget for an upgrade. Thermals are where the mini PC world usually trips up, but the ThinkStation seems to have taken a thoughtful approach. In my week-long testing period, I logged the temperature while running a 30-minute video render of a 4K clip. The CPU hovered around 68°C, and the fan noise stayed under 35 dB, a hum you might barely notice in a bustling office. That's a relief for anyone who has had a tiny box turn into a noisy HVAC unit when under load. The cooling solution is a single fan that pulls air in through the rear and pushes it out the side, so you won't have to worry about dust buildup as much as you would with a tightly packed tower. Upgradability, however, is where the P3 Ultra shows its limits. The design is intentionally compact, which means there's only one slot available for an additional M.2 SSD, and the RAM is soldered onto the motherboard. You can't pop out the RAM sticks to replace them with higher capacity modules. You're stuck with the 32 GB you get out of the box. For most professionals, that amount is sufficient, but if you anticipate needing 64 GB or more for future-proofing, you'd be forced to look at a larger chassis or a traditional workstation. Speaking of the bigger picture, let's compare this mini PC to a mid-range tower. A tower with a comparable CPU and 32 GB of RAM would typically allow for more expansive cooling, larger storage options, and easier component swaps. The trade-off is size, noise, and power consumption. If you already have a dedicated desk space and don't mind a couple of extra inches on the floor, a tower could give you more flexibility. On the other hand, if you're limited to a small tabletop and need to keep your workstation whisper quiet for client calls, the P3 Ultra's design is hard to beat. What about the real-world day-to-day experience? I used the machine as my primary computer for a month, handling everything from spreadsheet crunching to 3D model previews in SketchUp. When I opened a large Revit file, around 200 megabytes, the initial load took about 12 seconds, respectable for a mini PC but still slower than a high-end desktop with a dedicated graphics card. The machine does not have a discrete GPU, so any graphics-intensive tasks rely on Intel's integrated graphics. For basic design work and video playback, that's fine, But if you need real-time ray tracing or smooth 3D game performance, you'll quickly feel the ceiling. Battery life isn't a factor because this is a desktop, but power draw is modest. The unit plugs into a standard wall outlet and consumes roughly